The warning came at midnight, ship time. Ryan was asleep in his quarters when the alarm pulled him from dreams of Earth. He was on his feet before his eyes were fully open, pulling on his uniform as he ran toward the bridge. The corridors were full of crew members rushing to their stations, their faces pale with fear and excitement. "Report," Ryan barked as he burst onto the bridge. Katie was already at her console, her fingers flying over the controls. Long-range sensors detected a hyperspace disturbance 12 minutes ago. Multiple contacts. "Captain, there are so many of them." She put the sensor data on the main screen, and Ryan felt his blood run cold. The Keth-Ari swarm was emerging from hyperspace in waves. Thousands of ships poured out of the darkness, then tens of thousands, then more. They did not look like normal vessels. They looked like living things, organic shapes with hulls made of bone and chitin. Some were small, barely larger than fighters. Others were massive, bigger than anything in the Allied fleet, and they kept coming. "How many?" Ryan asked quietly. "Sensors are having trouble counting them all," Katie replied. Her voice was shaking slightly. "Current estimate is over 300,000 individual vessels. 300,000 against 2,000. The numbers were impossible, Admiral." Harrison's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is the Admiral. The enemy has arrived. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. Today, we fight for every world in this galaxy. Today, we show them what we are made of. All ships, engage defensive formations." The Allied fleet began to move. Solani cruisers powered up their shields, creating walls of blue energy between themselves and the swarm. Jomari battleships formed into tight groups, their weapons charging with deadly light. Varaxian carriers launched their drones by the thousands. The human fleet was placed at the rear, just as Fleet Master Korith had ordered. Ryan watched the battle begin from a distance, his hands gripping the arms of his command chair. The first clash was terrible to watch. The Keth-Ari did not fight like normal enemies. They did not use careful tactics or clever strategies. They simply attacked with overwhelming numbers, throwing wave after wave of ships at the Allied lines. Their weapons fired streams of green acid that ate through metal like water through paper. A Solani cruiser took a direct hit. Its famous energy shields flickered and died under the constant assault. Seconds later, acid began melting through the hull. Ryan watched in horror as the beautiful ship broke apart, its crew dying in the cold vacuum of space. "The Solani line is buckling," Derek reported, his voice tight with tension. 3 cruisers down, 5 more taking heavy damage. The Dramari counterattack was fierce. Their plasma cannons tore through Keth-Ari ships by the dozens, leaving trails of fire across the battlefield. But for every enemy they destroyed, 10 more took its place. The swarm seemed endless. "Message from Admiral Harrison," Katie announced. "All human vessels are to advance to the front lines immediately." Ryan felt his heart begin to pound. This was it. This was the moment they had trained for. "You heard the Admiral," he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "All hands, battle stations. Helm, take us forward. Weapons, prepare all missile tubes. Launch all fighter squadrons." The Endeavor surged forward, leading a wave of human ships toward the chaos of battle. Around them, the other species in the fleet watched with surprise. The humans were not supposed to advance. The humans were supposed to stay safe in the rear. But the humans had other plans. "Enemy contacts ahead," Derek reported. "Hundreds of them. Target the nearest cluster," Ryan ordered. "Fire at will." The Endeavor's missile tubes roared to life. Unlike the energy weapons used by other species, human weapons were simple and brutal. They fired physical projectiles that exploded on impact, tearing through organic hulls with devastating force. The first volley struck a group of Cathari fighters, turning them into clouds of debris. The second volley hit a larger vessel, punching holes through its body and leaving it spinning dead in space. Direct hits, Kitty reported, excitement creeping into her voice. Multiple enemy vessels destroyed. But the Cathari were already responding. Dozens of ships turned toward the Endeavor, their weapons charging with that terrible green light. "Incoming fire," Derek shouted. "Brace for impact." Ryan gripped his chair as the first acid streams hit the ship. The Endeavor shook violently. Alarms began screaming throughout the bridge. But the hull held. Human ships did not have fancy energy shields, but they were built tough. Their armor was thick and layered, designed to take punishment. "Damage report," Ryan demanded. "Minor hull breaches on decks 7 and 8, Marcus reported from engineering. "Nothing we cannot handle. Armor is holding." "Good. Return fire. Keep shooting until we run out of missiles." Across the battlefield, the human fleet was proving itself. Without shields to protect them, human ships relied on speed and aggression. They dived into the swarm at close range, where their weapons were most effective. They twisted and turned, dodging acid streams while pouring fire into enemy ships. On the flagship Defiant, Admiral Harrison coordinated the attack. His voice was calm over the communication channel, directing squadrons through gaps in the enemy formation. "Human carriers, focus on the larger vessels. Destroyers, clear a path. Fighter squadrons, keep those drones off our backs." A Solani observer stood on the bridge beside him, watching the battle with wide eyes. "Your ships are taking damage," he said. "Why do they not withdraw?" Harrison glanced at him. "Because we do not withdraw, we push forward. But your casualties will be honored. Every human who dies today dies protecting their home and their family. There is no better death than that." The observer fell silent, unable to understand the strange species that threw themselves into danger so willingly. On the Endeavor, the battle continued. The ship had taken a dozen hits now. Fires burned on 3 decks. The hull was scarred with acid burns. But she kept fighting. "Captain, we have a problem," Marcus called from engineering. "The reactor is running hot. If we keep firing at this rate, we will have a meltdown in 30 minutes. Ryan looked at the tactical display. The battle was far from over. The Cathari swarm was still vast, still overwhelming. 30 minutes was not enough time. "Can you give me more power?" he asked. "I can push the reactor past its limits," Marcus replied. "But if I do, there is no guarantee it will not explode." Ryan thought about his crew. He thought about their families back on Earth. He thought about what would happen if the Allied fleet lost this battle, if the Cathari were free to spread across the galaxy. "Do it," he said. "Push the reactor as hard as you can. We need every shot we can get." "Understood, Captain." The Endeavor shook as Marcus increased power to the weapon systems. On the tactical display, Ryan watched his missiles streak toward the enemy, watched Cathari ships explode in bowls of fire. Around him, his crew worked with desperate focus, knowing that every second might be their last dot, and somewhere in the chaos of battle, the other species in the fleet began to notice something strange. The humans were not dying. Despite taking terrible damage, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, the human ships kept fighting. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They pushed deeper into the swarm, buying time and space for the rest of the fleet dot. It was the first hint that perhaps the young species from Earth was not as weak as everyone thought. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by living beings. It floated in the darkness between stars, a massive sphere of glass and metal that could hold 10,000 representatives from across the known universe. Today, every seat was filled. The air was thick with tension, and the usual noise of alien chatter had gone completely silent. "Ambassador," Zilthar of the Varaxian Collective stood at the center platform. He was a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms that moved nervously as he spoke. His voice was translated into 100 different languages by the machines built into every seat. "The Cathari swarm has awakened," he said. "Our long-range scouts confirmed it 3 days ago. They are moving toward the core systems. They are hungry." A wave of fear passed through the chamber. Every species in the room knew the stories. The Cathari were ancient, older than most civilizations. They were not a single creature, but billions of them, connected through a hive mind that thought only of feeding and growing. 1,000 years ago, they had consumed 3 entire star systems before entering their long sleep. Now they were awake again. High Counselor Morath rose from his seat. He was a being made of living crystal, and light passed through his body like sunlight through water. He had led the council for 600 years, and his voice carried the weight of centuries. "We must act together," Morath said. "No single species can face this threat alone. I call upon all member nations to pledge their military forces to a combined defense fleet." One by one, the great powers of the galaxy made their promises. The Varaxians offered 200 warships and their finest commanders. The Solani Confederacy pledged their famous energy shields, which could stop almost any weapon. The Dramari Empire, a proud warrior race, committed their veteran soldiers who had fought in a dozen wars. The pledges continued for hours. Ships, weapons, soldiers, and supplies were promised from every corner of the galaxy. It was the largest military alliance in recorded history. Then the human delegation stood up. Admiral Jake Harrison was a man of 53 years with broad shoulders and gray hair, cut short and military style. His uniform was simple compared to the fancy robes worn by other species. Beside him stood Commander Laura Mitchell, a woman with sharp eyes and a calm face that revealed nothing of her thoughts. The humans had only joined the Galactic Council 30 years ago. In a galaxy where some civilizations were millions of years old, humanity was like a baby taking its first steps. Many of the older species looked at them with amusement. Some looked at them with pity. A few did not look at them at all. Jake cleared his throat and spoke into the translation device. "Earth and her colonies will commit our entire combat fleet to the defense effort. 400 vessels fully crewed and armed. We are also sending 50,000 ground troops and all of our available medical ships." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Solani representative, a tall figure whose skin glowed with soft blue light, leaned forward in his seat. His name was Counselor Verith, and he had lived for 3,000 years. "Your entire fleet?" Verith asked. There was something in his voice that might have been amusement. "Young Admiral, I do not think you understand what we are facing. The Cathari cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be frightened. They do not negotiate or surrender. This is not a diplomatic mission. This is war." Laura stepped forward before Jake could respond. Her voice was steady and clear. "We understand perfectly, Counselor. That is exactly why we are sending everything." Verith tilted his head, studying the human woman with new interest. "You have been a spacefaring species for less than 2 centuries. You have never faced an enemy like the Cathari. Your ships are adequate for patrol duties, perhaps, but this battle will require experience that your kind simply does not possess." Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. His eyes were hard as stone. "Counselor, humanity has been at war with itself since before we learned to write. We have never known a single generation without conflict. We have fought with sticks and stones, with swords and spears, with guns and bombs. We have burned our own cities and poisoned our own lands. We have killed each other by the millions over things as small as lines on a map or the words of old books." The chamber had gone very quiet. Every eye was on the human admiral. "Your species achieved peaceful unification 8,000 years ago. Jake continued. Mine still remembers what blood tastes like. We did not come here to watch from a safe distance. We did not come here to guard supply lines while others fight and die. We came here because this is what we do. We came here because we are very, very good at war. High Counselor Morath raised one crystalline hand. Admiral Harrison, your passion is noted. But the Counselor raises a valid concern. The Kethari have destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced than yours. What makes you believe your species can make a difference? Lavra pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A holographic display appeared in the air above her head, showing statistics and battle plans. We have studied every recorded encounter with the Kethari, she said. We have run thousands of simulations. We have trained our soldiers for close-quarters combat on hostile ground. Our pilots have logged millions of hours preparing for exactly this kind of enemy. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Kethari fight by overwhelming their enemies with numbers. They expect their targets to retreat, to run, to try to survive. They have never faced a species that does not retreat. They have never faced humans. Ambassador Zilthar spoke up, his forearms folded across his chest. Bold words. But words do not win wars. Jake nodded. You are right. Actions win wars. And when the fighting starts, you will see our actions. You will see what humanity can do when we fight for something greater than ourselves. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of creatures that had sailed between stars when humans were still living in caves. We are not asking for your approval. We are not asking for your respect. We are telling you that we will be there, standing beside you when the Kethari come. And we will not run. We will not hide. We will fight until we win or until there is nothing left of us to fight. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then High Counselor Morath nodded slowly. Very well, Admiral Harrison. Humanity's contribution is accepted. May you prove worthy of your own words. Jake saluted in the human military fashion, fist over heart. We will, Counselor. I promise you that. As the human delegation sat back down, Lavra leaned close to Jake and whispered, Think they believe us? Jake watched the alien faces around them, some curious, some doubtful, some openly dismissive. No, he said quietly, but they will. Waystation Prime was the largest military base in the Outer Territories. It hung in space like a metal moon, surrounded by docking rings that could hold 1,000 ships at once. For the past 2 weeks, vessels from across the galaxy had been arriving, gathering for the battle that everyone knew was coming. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the observation deck of the carrier Endeavour, watching the Allied fleet take shape. He was a tall man with dark skin and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. At 41 years old, he was considered young for a ship captain, but the lines on his face told a different story. The view outside was breathtaking. Solani cruisers floated nearby, their hulls glowing with the soft blue light of energy shields. Dramari battleships bristled with weapons, their dark metal armor scarred from ancient wars. Varaxian carriers launched endless. Patrols of small drone fighters that moved like schools of fish through the darkness. And then there were the human ships. Endeavour was one of 40 carriers in the human fleet. She was not as pretty as the Solani vessels, or as heavily armed as the Dramari warships. Her hull was plain gray metal, functional rather than beautiful. But Ryan loved her like a living thing. She had carried him through 3 major battles and dozens of smaller fights. She had never let him down. Captain, we have a message from Admiral Harrison. Ryan turned to see Lieutenant Katie Barnes standing at the doorway. She was his communications officer, a young woman with red hair and freckles who looked too young to be serving on a warship. But Ryan had seen her work under pressure, and he knew there was steel underneath her gentle appearance. "What does the Admiral want?" Ryan asked. "Fleet commanders are meeting in 1 hour. Virtual conference. You are expected to attend." Ryan nodded and took one last look at the gathered fleet. Somewhere out there, in the darkness beyond the stars, the Cathari were coming. He wondered how many of these ships would survive the battle. He wondered if the Endeavor would be one of them. The virtual conference room was a marvel of alien technology. Representatives from every species in the Allied fleet appeared as holographic images seated around a massive table. Ryan found his place among the other human captains, feeling very small among beings that had commanded starships for thousands of years. Admiral Harrison sat at the head of the human delegation, his face calm and serious. Commander Lavra Mitchell was beside him, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk watching for prey. Fleet Master Korith of the Dramari spoke first. He was a massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with thick scales and 4 eyes that glowed red in the dim light. His species had been warriors since before humans had discovered fire. "We must discuss the battle plan," Korith said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "The Cathari will arrive in approximately 3 days. Our scouts report their swarm numbers in the hundreds of thousands." A wave of worry passed through the room. Hundreds of thousands of enemy ships against their fleet of just over 2,000. "The humans should remain in the rear guard," Korith continued. "They can protect supply lines and provide medical support. The front lines require ships with proper shields and weapons." Ryan felt his hands tighten into fists. He looked at Admiral Harrison, expecting anger, but the old man's face remained calm. "With respect, Fleet Master," Harrison said, "my people did not travel halfway across the galaxy to hide behind others. We came to fight." Korith made a sound that might have been laughter. "Fight? Your ships have no energy shields. Your weapons are primitive projectile systems. One Cathari acid blast would melt through your hull in seconds. Then we will have to make sure they do not hit us," Lavra said quietly. Counselor Verith of the Solani spoke up, his glowing skin pulsing with soft light. "Admiral, no one questions the bravery of your species. But bravery alone does not win battles. The Cathari have destroyed civilizations that were spacefaring when your ancestors were still living in trees. What can you possibly offer that we do not already have?" Harrison leaned forward, his eyes hard. "You want to know what we offer? We offer soldiers who do not know how to give up. We offer pilots who will fly into certain death if the mission requires it. We offer crews who will keep fighting even when their ships are burning around them." He paused, looking around the table at the alien faces. Every species here has known peace for centuries, some for thousands of years. Your soldiers are well trained, but they have never faced true desperation. They have never fought with their backs against the wall, knowing that failure means the end of everything they love. Ryan watched his admiral speak, feeling pride swell in his chest. Humans have lived with that desperation our entire existence. We have fought against impossible odds again and again. We have won wars that we should have lost. We have survived disasters that should have destroyed us. That is what we offer. We offer a species that does not know how to accept defeat." The room was silent. Fleet Master Korith studied the human admiral with all 4 of his eyes. "Pretty words," the Dramari commander said finally. "But I have heard pretty words from many species before they were consumed by the Cathari. I will believe in human strength when I see it on the battlefield." "Then watch closely," Harrison replied, "and try not to blink." After the meeting ended, Ryan returned to the Endeavor. His crew was waiting for him on the bridge. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, a heavy-set man with grease-stained hands, looked up from his console. "How did it go, Captain?" Ryan sat down in his command chair and sighed. "About as expected. They think we are children playing with toys. Are we going to prove them wrong? Asked Lieutenant Commander Derek Santos, the ship's executive officer. He was a slim man with a thin mustache and quick eyes. Ryan looked at his crew. They were young, most of them. Katie at Communications, barely 25. Santos, only 30. Even Marcus, the oldest among them, was just 43. They had trained for years. They had run simulations until they could fight in their sleep. But none of them had ever faced anything like the Cathari. Yes, Ryan said quietly. We are going to prove them wrong. We are going to show this entire galaxy what humans can do. He pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands, this is the captain. In 3 days, we will face the greatest enemy this galaxy has ever known. Many of us will not survive. I will not lie to you about that. But I want you to know something. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The other species in this fleet think we are weak. They think we are too young, too primitive, too inexperienced to matter. They have put us in the rear guard because they do not believe we can handle the front lines. His voice hardened. They are wrong. When the battle begins, we will show them what humanity is made of. We will fight harder than anyone expects. We will make them remember the day they stood beside humans in battle. And when it is over, they will never doubt us again. He released the button and sat back in his chair. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere in that darkness, the Cathari were coming, and humanity was ready to meet them. Nobody in the Galactic Council had ever seen anything quite like it. The battle had been raging for 6 hours. The Allied fleet had lost nearly 200 ships. The Solani barriers had failed completely. The Dramari lines were crumbling. The Varaxian drones had been destroyed by the thousands. Everything was falling apart, and then the humans went mad. Fleetmaster Korith watched from his command ship as the human vessels abandoned all defensive positions. They were not retreating. They were attacking. They pushed directly into the heart of the swarm, where the fighting was thickest and the danger was greatest. What are they doing? Korith demanded. They will be destroyed. His tactical officer studied the displays with confusion. They appear to be targeting the largest Cathari vessels. The command ships. Korith's 4 eyes widened. No one attacked the command ships. They were protected by thousands of smaller vessels. Getting close to them was suicide, but the humans did not seem to care about suicide. Captain Ryan Cole stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, his uniform torn and stained with blood from a cut on his forehead. Half the lights on the bridge had gone dark. Smoke filled the air, but his voice was steady as steel. Target the command ship directly ahead. All weapons. Fire everything we have. The Endeavor was not alone. Dozens of human ships had formed into a wedge formation, cutting through the swarm like a knife through flesh. They took terrible damage as they advanced. 2 destroyers exploded. A cruiser lost its engines and drifted helplessly, but the rest kept pushing forward. Enemy command ship in range, Derek reported. It is huge, Captain. Bigger than anything we have faced. Ryan looked at the creature on the screen. It was a living mountain, a vast organic ship that pulsed with dark energy. Thousands of smaller Cathari swarmed around it like bees protecting their queen. Launch all remaining missiles, Ryan ordered. Every single one. Empty the tubes. The Endeavor shook his missile after missile streaked toward the target. Other human ships joined the attack, pouring fire into the command ship. The creature's organic armor absorbed the first wave, then the second. But on the third wave, something cracked. A hole appeared in its side, exposing the soft flesh beneath. We heard it, Kitty shouted. Captain, we actually heard it. But they had also made it angry. The command ship turned its attention to the human fleet. Massive weapons along its sides, charged with that terrible green light. When they fired, the acid streams were the size of rivers. 3 human ships vanished instantly, dissolved into nothing. The Endeavour took a glancing blow that melted through 2 decks on the starboard side. The screams of dying crew members echoed through the communication system. Ryan gripped his chair as the ship rocked beneath him. Damage report. We have lost decks 4 and 5, Marcus reported, his voice strained. 30 crew members confirmed dead. Reactor is critical. We have maybe 10 minutes before total failure. 10 minutes. It was not enough time to kill the command ship. It was not enough time to do anything. But then Ryan saw something on the tactical display that made him smile despite everything. Katie, open a channel to all human ships. Channel open, Captain. Ryan leaned forward. All vessels, this is Captain Cole of the Endeavour. We have wounded the beast. Now we need to kill it. I am asking for volunteers. I need ships willing to ram the command ship directly. We are going to tear it apart from the inside. The channel was silent for a moment. Then voices began to respond. This is the destroyer Valor. We are with you, Captain. The cruiser Independence standing by, ready to follow you to hell. Fighter Squadron 7 reporting. Just point us at the target. 11 ships. 11 captains willing to sacrifice themselves and their crews for a chance to hurt the enemy. Ryan felt tears in his eyes. All ships, follow me. It has been an honor serving with you. The human formation accelerated toward the command ship. Around them, Cathari fighters tried to stop them, but the other allied ships had noticed what was happening. Jamari cannons cleared a path. Solani vessels provided cover fire. For the first time, the entire fleet was working together. The Endeavour was the first to reach the command ship. Ryan aimed for the hole they had created earlier, the gap in the creature's armor. All hands, brace for impact. The carrier struck the command ship at full speed, driving deep into its body. Metal screamed against organic flesh. The Endeavour's hull crumpled, but she kept pushing forward, her engines burning until the moment they died. Inside the command ship, the scene was like something from a nightmare. Organic corridors pulsed with alien life. Strange fluids dripped from the walls. And everywhere, there were Cathari warriors, smaller creatures bred for combat. Commander Laura Mitchell led the boarding party. She had transferred from the flagship specifically for this mission. Behind her came 50 Marines in heavy combat armor, their weapons loaded and ready. Move fast, Laura ordered. Find the central nerve cluster and destroy it. That is how we kill this thing. The Marines advanced through the living ship, fighting every step of the way. Cathari warriors attacked in waves. Their claws and acid spit deadly at close range. Sergeant Kyle Turner took a hit to his chest plate that ate through the armor and burned his skin beneath. He kept fighting, shooting 3 more enemies before he fell. Lieutenant Megan Price moved beside Laura, her rifle never stopping. She was a small woman with a fierce spirit, and she had killed more Cathari than anyone else in the squad. Commander, I see something ahead, Megan called out. Large chamber. Lots of movement. Laura looked through her scope and saw it. The nerve cluster. It was a massive organic structure that pulsed with light, sending signals throughout the command ship. Destroy it, and the entire vessel would die. But between them and the cluster were hundreds of Cathari warriors. We do not have enough people to fight through that, one of the Marines said. Laura checked her ammunition. She was almost out. Most of her team was the same. They had lost 15 people just getting this far. We do not need to fight through, she said quietly. We just need to reach it. She pulled out a small device from her belt. It was a nuclear charge, powerful enough to destroy everything within a kilometer. Everyone, fall back to the entrance point. Get to the escape pods. I will finish this. "Commander, no," Megan protested. "I will carry the charge. You need to lead the survivors out." Lara shook her head. "I am the fastest runner here. I have the best chance of reaching the cluster." Before anyone could argue further, she was moving. She sprinted toward the nerve cluster, firing her rifle until it clicked empty, then throwing it aside and pulling her pistol. Cathari warriors tried to stop her, but she dodged and weaved through them like water through rocks. She took a hit to her leg, then another to her shoulder. The acid burned through her armor and into her flesh. The pain was incredible, but she kept running. 20 meters. 10 meters. 5. She reached the nerve cluster and pressed the device against its surface. Her fingers found the activation switch. "For Earth," she whispered. "For all of us." The explosion lit up the darkness of space. The command ship shuddered, then began to die. Its lights went dark. Its weapons stopped firing. The smaller Cathari around it suddenly lost their coordination, flying in random directions, crashing into each other. On the bridge of his command ship, Fleet Master Korath watched in stunned silence. "The humans destroyed the command ship," his tactical officer reported. "They flew their own vessels into it and detonated explosives inside." Korath said nothing. He could not find words for what he had just witnessed. Across the battlefield, the Allied fleet began to rally. With the command ship dead, the Cathari swarm was weakening. Their hive mind was damaged, their coordination failing. For the first time, the tide of battle was turning, and it was the humans who had turned it. The Battle of the Outer Reaches lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, the Cathari swarm had been broken. Their remaining ships scattered into deep space, leaderless and dying. The hive mind that had connected them for thousands of years was silent. The threat was over, but victory had come at a terrible price. Captain Ryan Cole woke up in a medical bay 3 days after the battle. His left arm was wrapped in bandages, crushed when a bulkhead collapsed during the final attack. His head throbbed with pain. For a moment, he did not know where he was or what had happened. Then he remembered everything. "Easy, Captain." A gentle voice came from beside his bed. He turned to see Katie Barnes sitting in a chair, her face tired but relieved. "You have been unconscious for a while. The doctors were not sure you would wake up." "The ship," Ryan croaked. His throat was dry and raw. "The Endeavor." Katie's expression fell. "She's gone, Captain. We lost her when we hit the command ship. But we got the crew out. Most of them, anyway. Most of them." Ryan closed his eyes, thinking of all the people who had not made it. All the young men and women who had trusted him to lead them. How many had he lost? How many families would never see their loved ones again? "How many?" he asked quietly. "From the Endeavor, 63 dead. From the entire human fleet." Katie paused, and Ryan saw tears in her eyes. 142 ships destroyed. 18,000 casualties. Almost half of everyone we brought. 18,000. The number hit Ryan like a physical blow. He had known the battle would be costly, but he had never imagined it would be this bad. "And the others?" he asked. "The Allied fleet?" "They lost about 300 ships total. Far fewer casualties than expected. Thanks to..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "Thanks to what we did. The other species are calling it the human charge. They say we saved the entire fleet." Ryan lay back against his pillow and stared at the ceiling. They had won. They had actually won. But it did not feel like victory. It felt like survival, purchased with blood and fire. Over the following days, Ryan recovered enough to leave the medical bay. He walked through the corridors of Way Station Prime on crutches, seeing the aftermath of battle everywhere. Wounded soldiers from a dozen species filled the medical wards. Damaged ships crowded the repair docks. The air was heavy with grief and exhaustion. But there was something else in the air too. Something Ryan had never expected. Respect. Everywhere he went, alien beings stopped to stare at him. Some nodded in greeting. Others stepped aside to let him pass. A group of Dramari warriors, massive creatures who had looked at humans with contempt just weeks ago, actually saluted when Ryan walked by. "What is happening?" Ryan asked Derek Santos, who had survived the battle with minor injuries. "Why are they all looking at me like that?" Derek smiled grimly. "Word has spread about what we did. The whole galaxy knows now. They're looking at you because you are human, Captain. And right now, being human means something." The Galactic Council met 1 week after the battle. The Great Hall that had been filled with doubt and dismissal was now packed with beings who wanted to hear what the humans had to say. Hi, Councilor Morth stood at the center platform, his crystalline body catching the light from 100 different sources. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber. "We are gathered today to honor those who fell in the Battle of the Outer Reaches. Representatives from every member species lost brave soldiers in the fight against the Cathari. Their sacrifice will be remembered for generations." He paused, and his gaze turned toward the human delegation. "But we must give special recognition to one species in particular, a species that many of us doubted, a species that we thought too young and too inexperienced to matter in a conflict of this scale." Admiral Jake Harrison stood in his dress uniform, his arms still in a sling from wounds he had received during the battle. Beside him stood the surviving captains and commanders of the human fleet. There were so few of them now, so many empty seats where officers should have been. When the battle began, Morth continued, humanity was assigned to the rear guard. They were expected to stay back, to protect supply lines, to watch while others fought. Instead, they charged directly into the heart of the swarm. They attacked the command ships that no one else dared approach. They sacrificed their own vessels to create openings for the rest of the fleet. The chamber was completely silent. Every eye was on the humans. 18,000 human soldiers died in that battle. 142 ships were destroyed. Humanity lost almost half of its entire military force in a single day. Morth's voice grew heavy with emotion. They did not fight for territory. They did not fight for resources. They fought for worlds they had never seen. They fought for species they barely knew. They fought because it was the right thing to do. Fleet Master Korith rose from his seat. The Dramari commander who had dismissed humans as children walked slowly across the chamber toward Admiral Harrison. His 4 eyes were unreadable, but his movements were deliberate and purposeful. When he reached Harrison, he did something that no Dramari had done for another species in 3,000 years. He lowered his massive head in a bow of respect. "I was wrong about your people," Korith said, his voice rough with emotion. "I called you inexperienced. I called you weak. I said you belonged in the rear guard." He raised his head and met Harrison's eyes. "I have never been more wrong about anything in my life." Harrison nodded slowly. "We did not come here to prove anything. We came here to help." "And you did," Korith replied. "You saved us all. The Dramari Empire will never forget what humanity did. We will stand beside you as allies and brothers until the stars grow cold." Similar declarations came from across the chamber. The Solani pledged eternal friendship. The Varaxians offered trade agreements and technology sharing. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now spoke of partnership and cooperation. Through it all, Ryan Cole watched from his seat among the junior officers. He thought about the friends he had lost. Lieutenant Commander Megan Price, who had volunteered to help carry the nuclear charge and died fighting beside Commander Mitchell. Sergeant Kyle Turner, who had kept shooting even as acid ate through his armor. So many others whose names he would never forget. Commander Mitchell had survived barely. She had been found floating in space by a rescue team, her armor destroyed, her body burned but still alive. The doctor said it was a miracle. Ryan thought it was simply who Laura Mitchell was. She did not know how to give up. After the ceremony ended, Ryan found himself standing at an observation window, looking out at the stars. The repairs were almost complete. Soon, the human fleet would return home to rebuild. They would train new soldiers and build new ships. And if the galaxy ever needed them again, they would answer the call. Admiral Harrison walked up beside him, moving slowly because of his injuries. "How are you holding up, Captain?" Ryan considered the question. "I do not know, sir. We won, but it does not feel like winning. Not with so many people dead." Harrison nodded. "It never does. That is the cost of war. You lose people you care about, and you have to keep going anyway. The best thing you can do is make sure their sacrifice meant something." "Did it?" "Mean something, I mean." Harrison looked down at the stars, his expression thoughtful. 3 days ago, this galaxy saw humans as children, newcomers who did not belong at the adults' table. Now they see us differently. They see us as warriors, as allies worth having, as a species that will stand and fight when everything seems lost. He turned to Ryan, and there was pride in his tired eyes. "Your crew helped change how the entire universe sees humanity. I would say that means something." Ryan thought about that. He thought about Katie and Derek and Marcus and all the others who had survived. He thought about the Endeavor, broken and dead but victorious. He thought about the 18,000 men and women who would never go home. "I suppose it does, sir." They stood in silence for a long moment. Two humans looking out at a galaxy that would never see them the same way again. The stars burned bright and eternal, holding secrets that humanity was only beginning to discover. But one thing was certain. Whatever challenges the future held, whatever enemies rose to threaten the peace, humanity would face them. They would fight. They would sacrifice. They would never give up. That was simply who they were. And now the entire galaxy knew it.